then there'll be pause. And then, to me, what was the most wonderful phrase in any language? My story takes flight over countries and kingdoms of long ago. Now, storytelling, in the beginning, was for educating children and preparing them for adult life. But it was also for peaceful resolution of conflict and for healing. And listening to a story, hearing a story, can heal you, or at least start the healing process. What do we mean when we say someone is sick? Well, sometimes it's a physical sickness, sometimes it's a mental sickness, sometimes it's a spiritual sickness. Does that make sense to you? But whatever it is, it's a kind of imbalance. It's like, because every human being is like scales. When do they stand in perfect balance? When do the scales still and fine, equally balanced? It's when everything is perfect, right? They have the same weight, or they're all empty. The scales are empty. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. When you have this, then there's something going on, right? That's what we call sickness. When I was 3 days after my 20th birthday, I had a dream. And I was beaten by a mad dog. It was very painful. I had never been beaten by a dog in my life, you see. I was bleeding. And there came to me a man in a dream. He was robed in white, sparkling white. And he came to me, and he comforted me. And he bound the wound. And then he said, I felt so wonderful because the pain subsided. No more pain. So to me, he was my healer. So I said, I want to follow him. I want to go with you. And he said, the time has not come yet. And I wanted to run after him, but my legs felt like lead, dead wood. And he went further, he moved further and further away from me until he vanished from sight. A few days after that, I was taken ill. Pounding headache all the time. All the time. Every single minute. At night, no sleep. Total sleeplessness. And for those of you who have been, who have known or experienced sleeplessness, you know how painful that can be. Every single noise you're going to hear. If a bird of ill omen goes hooting, you're going to hear it. If a drunken person screams, you're going to hear it. Every single, and it can be unsettling. But anyway, I went to the doctor. And the doctor examined me and said, you are on the brink of nervous breakdown. You are mentally exhausted. I was in my senior year of high school. The year before, I had placed first on the national English language test. And I wanted to do it again, you know, because I had the college entrance exam was just a few months away. It usually happened in June, but that was in February. And when I went to the doctor, they said, you had to leave school. And you forget about pursuing your studies. Because you have no brain power left. And when you feel better, I'm going to give you some prescriptions. When you feel better, get a job that requires little mental effort. I couldn't believe it. To me, it was a waking nightmare. Many of us have experienced the death of a loved one. You suffered bereavement. And we all know how painful that can be. But to experience the death of a dream is even more painful. And perhaps the reason why we weep when we lose a loved one is because in passing, the loved one has taken away some of our dreams. Maybe that's the reason why we cry so much. Why so painful? The death of a dream is much more painful than the death of a person. That day, age 20, I experienced the death of a dream. Because I had always wanted to be, an ambassador, a university professor, a world-renowned writer. And all of a sudden, my dreams have turned to ashes. I knew not how I got back home that day. I went home, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was angry with the whole world. You know what I mean? Because when you are pursuing a dream, it feels magical. You know what I mean? You feel on top of the world. But when the dream dies, the whole world is a graveyard. I went home. I didn't even talk to my mom. I was living with my biological mom and her husband, whom I had thought was my father. I just went to my room and shut the door. My mom knew I had come back somehow. So she was expecting me to come and tell her what the doctor had said. As I wasn't coming, she came and knocked on the door. I said, "Come in." "What's the matter with you? You lie in bed in broad daylight? What's the problem?" That was when I broke down. I told her what the doctor had told me. I had to stop, I had to leave school, and then get a job somewhere, a job that required no mental exertion. Do you know what my mom said?
Get a new doctor.
Get
a new doctor.
No, she said, "What does the doctor know?" And that statement has stuck with me all these years. What does the doctor know? When your father comes home today, I'm going to talk to him and we'll send you to your elder mom, the one I told you about. And she and her husband will take care of you. They will take you to a healer. Less than a week later, I traveled about about 200 miles really, 200, 300 miles to the little town where my elder mom and her husband were living. I told her, I told him, well, they said, you'll be whole again. Don't worry. 3 days later, my elder mom and her husband's second wife took me to this healer in a remote village. And his name was Gajeu. It means lean on me. Lean on me. And he looked at me. Well, all my elder mom had to say was, I brought you your son because he's not well. That was all she had to say. And he looked at me. And for a few moments, I had a feeling that there were just him and myself in his temple. No one else. Excuse me. He looked at me and I looked at him. He looked at me. He shook his head. And he heaved a deep sigh. And he went through a little ritual. And he started talking. Your son is sick not with the sickness of the body, but with the sickness of the spirit. He was separated from his father at birth. And unless they are reunited, there will be big trouble. I couldn't believe it. And he went on to describe what I later found out was the custody battle between my mother and her elder sister, because my mother had only one elder sister, and that was my aunt, the one who adopted me. She supported her all the way. The custody battle, because my mom left my father when I was still in her womb. Maybe 2 or 3 days after I was conceived, she made up her mind to go. And when she finally left, she lived in hiding for 9 months. When I was born, my father found out somehow. He came with a ram to perform the naming ceremony. My mother drove him away. This is not your son, she said. Where were you for 9 months? He said, excuse me, where were you for 9 months? Because my mom knew that if she should agree to hand me over to him, then she would have to go with him. Do you see what I'm saying? But she didn't want to, she had it with him. But my father, when he left